Okay, today's job is to break in an MP9 tki4 ready set for a customer who has ordered the PBM break-in service. So this bad boy will be ready for firing up on Christmas Day. Okay, so here it is out of the box. tki4 ready set has had a nice update on its body shop, looking pretty cool. PBM colours, black, orange, like that. It's got some new tyres. Looks like quite a blocky, sturdy tread pattern, so they should last quite well. Fairly firm rubber as well, so good for bashing. You see, when you take these things out of the box, the suspension is held with cable ties, so the first thing to do is cut those cable ties away. So next part of the preparation is to install the batteries. So these things take 4 AA batteries inside this box. There's a little battery cradle, and then when we've done that, we also need to prepare and install the air filter. You see, the carb has a little bit of foam in it to plug it whilst it's in transit. We need to install the air filter on there before we do anything about starting the engine up. Okay, so there you can see I've installed the AA batteries. Just be sure that you put all 4 in, drop it back in the box. Be amazed the number of times we've had customers visit the shop saying it won't work, and they've just put the top 2 in and not turned the cradle over and put all 4 batteries in. Okay, so here's our Kyosho air filter. As you can see, it is pre-assembled from the factory, but it isn't pre-oiled. So we need to disassemble this, remove those 2 screws there, and oil the foam elements. This helps to stop the ingress of fine dirt into the engine, which would very quickly ruin it. So I'll get on and do that. Okay, so once we've disassembled the air filter, you see there's 2 elements, an inner and an outer. We've got some air filter oil. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour a few drops of that into this plastic bag, and I'm going to scrunch up the filters until they're nicely soaked with this stuff, not dripping wet through. It just needs to be impregnated with it. I'll show you what it looks like afterwards. Okay, so there's the filters in the bag, nicely coated with oil. So I'm going to take them out of that bag, and I'm going to scrunch them up in the kitchen towel just to take out any excess oil before we refit them. So just give them a scrunch. You can see there any excess oil soaks into the kitchen towel, and that just leaves us our filters ready to be refit. Okay, so there's our reassembled air filter. Just check all the edges, make sure that nothing's creased, there's no gaps. That's ready to be refitted to the car. We won't actually fit it to the car immediately, just because I'm going to install the batteries in the controller, and I'm going to check the idle gap and stuff like that before we crack on. You're going to need to fix a cable tie around that groove there, and then when you fit it to the car, cable tie goes around there. That's just to secure it. Okay, so next up we're going to take AA batteries and install them in the handset. Battery doors on the bottom of this handset, just slide that open and drop the batteries in. And then once our battery's in, we're going to start by turning the transmitter on first. You can see it displays the voltage, 6.4 volts. And then once we've done that, we're going to turn the car on. And on the tki4, our switch is at the back of the receiver box. Okay, there you go. So push it. It's actually set so that you push it away from the engine. Personally, if I was building it now, I'd probably mount that switch the other way around so that you push it on by pushing it towards the engine. But that's just a personal preference thing. So away from the engine turns that switch on, and you can see now we've got the steering. We've got steering, and when I pull the throttle, we have got throttle. So what I'm looking for here is that we've got a sufficient idle gap. I don't know whether you'll actually see it. Yeah, you can probably see it there. So you see the right hand side of the slider. You see as I open that by pulling the trigger, the throttle opens up and then shuts down to idle. So you can see there's probably slightly more than 1/2 mil gap there. That's our idle gap. That's probably good enough to get the car fired up in the beginning. And then we want to check the throttle end point. So we're checking here. I'll pull the trigger to full, and we can see there that once it's at full, it's pretty much flush with the opening of the carb. So we're pretty much set correctly from factory, which is great to see. And then we can also, if we want to, check the brakes. So my camera's not focusing very well. It's kind of hard to do whilst holding a phone. But if you see, when I push the trigger away, you can see the brakes. So this is your brakes here. You've got 2 brake cams, one on the front, one on the rear. And you can see calipers either side of the centre differential. That's how these cars brake. So as I push the throttle away, that pulls on the brakes, and I can feel I can't move the car backwards and forwards with that brake on. So we've got brakes. One more quick adjustment we'll do on the bench is just our steering trim. So you can probably see those wheels look like they're going slightly to the left. So on the handset, on this particular handset, our steering trim is on the top here, this little clicker button. So we're going to click it to the right. Straighten those wheels up. Make sure that we don't go too far. Obviously we'll readjust that as and when we're actually running the car, but you want it to be going as straight as possible when you first start it up. Okay, so the next part of the job is to prepare the fuel. So I've come outside, we don't want stinky horrible fuel in the house. So we're using Optimix ready to run 25% nitro for these 8-scale buggies. And you're going to need a nice squeegee fuel bottle. So basically we're going to draw the fuel up by squeezing the bottle, putting the nozzle into the fuel bottle, letting go of the bottle, and it will literally just draw the fuel up into the bottle, and then we can refuel. Okay, it's kind of hard to do all this one-handed, but you can see I scrunched the bottle up, put the nozzle in, and you can see the fuel getting drawn up into the squeegee bottle. Just like that. There we are, we've got some fuel in the bottle ready to put in the car. Okay, so we've filled the tank nice and full. The next thing I'm going to do before I start thinking about priming it and starting it for the first time is I want to get some heat into that engine before I start it up for the first time. So here we have a hairdryer. You can buy engine heaters with a good old hairdryer will do the job, and you just want to blow the heat going onto the crankcase of the engine. This will help it start easily. It's kinder on the engine rather than burning it cold. It's a particularly cold time of year. So this will just help put a little bit of heat in there, and this will sit quiet and you can start. I'll spin the hairdryer around. It's really good. Okay, so she's nice and warm now. I'll put my hand on the cooling head. It's nice and warm. We've got a little bit of heat in there, so that's good. Going to help it to start. So we need to prime the engine. I'm not going to be able to show you this whilst holding the camera, I don't think. But basically, I'm going to put a finger over here, and I'm going to pull the pull start a few times. I'll leave the video running, so at least you can hear what I'm doing. So finger over the exhaust, grab the pull start, just pull it a few times. You'll start to see the fuel actually draw up through the fuel pipe. Okay, that's now got fuel, and then once there's fuel inside the engine. We then want to get ready to start. So we're going to take our glow igniter, make sure that that's been charged. I'm going to place it on the glow plug. We're going to leave it for a few seconds, and then we're going to remember to switch the car back on. I switched it off just to save battery power. Okay, now we're going to pull the pull start and try and start it. Again, I need two hands for this, so you won't actually see what I'm doing. Okay, so I had a few pulls and it didn't fire, so I'm just going to increase the idle slightly. It's a little bit awkward to get to on these cars, but you see this screw here is your idle. Turn it clockwise to increase. Just turn that up a little bit. Okay, so she's ready to fire. I've turned the idle up a fair bit just to give us a fighting chance of getting it to fire, because the first couple of pulls it just didn't have enough guts. I'll try and stand that up there so you can at least hear it. So I've put the car on a car stand. Here's the car stand there, just so the wheels are off the ground. We're just letting it idle through this first tank of fuel. Now you can hear the idle's pretty high. Just with that, that's to help it fire into life the first time. Now you can see how rich that is. It's actually spitting unburnt fuel straight out of the exhaust. Okay, so you'll probably see whilst the engine's been idling, I've removed the new wheels and tyres, and I've just put some old ones on, so that when I start running this car in, we're not using up the customer's new tyres. We just use some old ones that are ready to go in acetone of ours anyway. I don't know if you can see from here, but the tank is getting... Give it another few minutes and then we'll stop the engine up. Okay, I've switched phones. Unfortunately my phone died, so anyway, we've run through that tank. I've refueled and we're ready to start driving it. Checked the temperature when it was running before, and we were at about 150 Fahrenheit. You can see that on there, but 83 now. So we're about ready to restart it. So the reason we let it cool is just a process of hardening. So by heating it up, cooling it down, and you get a little bit of a hardening process going on. That will help the engine long term. So the car's back on, and we'll just double check with the steering. And we'll get ready to refire again. There's still a bit of warmth in there, so it shouldn't need preheating again. I'll just fire that up. I'm not gonna risk trying to do it with this phone. Okay, so she fired up the first pull. You can hear it's very rich still. So just trying to get through that fuel. And when we start driving it, we might need just to lean that bottom end off a little bit. We'll try it. Okay, so we're out on the drive, and I'm just going to keep figure of 8 in this until we get through a couple of tanks of fuel. I'll try and set the camera up somewhere so you can at least see a little bit of what I'm doing. Okay, so once I've done a couple of tanks, figure of 8 in, it's time to start driving it just that little bit more really. So
longish straight lines, backwards and forwards. Just literally pulling the trigger slowly until we touch full throttle. As soon as we touch full throttle, we come off again, let it coast, turn it around, repeat the process. You get through the tank pretty quickly at this stage with the engine being still so rich. So it's now had 5 tanks of fuel, 1 idle, 2 figure of 8, and 2 during the passage. So now we can just start to change the tune on the engine just slightly so that the performance is just improved slightly. We don't want to go too far too soon. So basically, just to explain to you, on these engines we've got 3 screws. Top screw here is your high speed needle. So that is regulating the fuel to air mixture when your throttle is open, when you're at full throttle essentially. And then on the other side of the car, the gold coloured screw there is your low speed needle, and much in the same way as the high speed needle, the low speed needle regulates the fuel to air mixture when the car is idling, so where it's at now. And with both of those screws, if you turn them clockwise, that will lean the mixture, so less fuel. And if you turn it counterclockwise, that will richen the mixture, so more fuel. Now generally these things are set rich from factory because you want them rich as you break the engine in. So we're going to start the process of just leaning the engine off slightly so that the car performs a bit better and will run a bit longer on a temperature. To explain to you a little bit about the needles. So here we have high speed needle. So as I said in the previous clip, if you turn this clockwise, that leans the mixture. And if you see the amount that I turned it there, so this is our starting point, that amount, that's what we generally adjust by. So you're imagining that the circle is the face of a clock and we're just turning it 5 minutes at a time. So we'll lean it off 5 minutes at a time. So that is now 5 minutes leaner than it was when we ran it before. Now it's better to do this when the engine is running because you need to hear, see, feel what that's doing to the tune of the engine, but just so that you can hear it correctly, we'll just do that 5 minutes whilst the engine's stopped. And likewise with your low speed needle here, so the gold one, that's your low speed needle. So the same process, just 5 minutes at a time. I'm not going to do it on this one now, I'll do that when the engine's running. You don't need to go too far with these things. I would have thought from factory any more than maybe 20 minutes on the clock face. That's probably as much as you'll ever need to tune it. The thing is, if you go too far, the engine will be too lean and it'll blow up. And then that's an expensive mistake because you've got to replace the engine, which is about £100, give or take a few quid. So yeah, not worth the risk. You get a few seconds of increased speed and then a big bill. So definitely worth just making sure that the engine's nice and rich and not running too lean. You can use a thermometer like this to check the temperature if you want to. It's not completely necessary, but it does give you an idea of whether the engine is rich, lean. Basically, you want to take the ambient temperature, which today is 55 degrees Fahrenheit, and you want to add a maximum of 180 Fahrenheit. So 230 Fahrenheit when it's running is a maximum temperature to be guided by at today's ambient temperature. obviously it differs as the ambient temperature changes. So we've got the idle, and it's just leaned off the low speed slightly. So it's still idling fairly high because it's still new. It's still running it with it, and keeping the idle a little bit high, just a little bit more spinning. Yeah, that's pretty good now. And I've leaned the top end off ever so slightly as well. So you can see there's still a lot of fuel there, and it doesn't rev right out, but it's a little bit more performance now. At this stage I still wouldn't be holding on full throttle for a long time, just being kind to it in the early days. And you can hear the idle still creeping a little bit as it loads up with fuel, but it's not bad now. That would be quite good fun to drive around now. Okay, so I'll just see if I can get a little bit of video of it on the street. Now I've tuned it a little bit.